In part 1 of the story, Mr. Akoto, after secretly purchasing a struggling company from his friend Wofa Kwasi, decides to keep his ownership hidden while he works undercover as a logistics coordinator. He quickly encounters widespread corruption within the company, including bribery, nepotism, and various schemes by employees to siphon off funds. Despite facing numerous challenges, including inflated project costs and the existence of ghost employees, Mr. Akoto remains determined to uncover the full extent of the corruption and devise a plan to save the company. The narrative ends with Mr. Akoto preparing for a crucial moment when the arrival of high-value goods will test the integrity of the company's operations, setting the stage for his next moves. Fighting corruption in my own company became a shocking experience, especially as I worked undercover as an ordinary employee. I often wondered how the staff would react if they discovered I was actually the CEO. One day, I decided to give the human resources manager, Mr. Akwaboa, a second chance, hoping he might change his ways. I went to his office for a serious conversation. "Mr. Akwaboa," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "I'm really worried about the company's future. The way money is being stolen by the workers and staff. I'm scared. What if the CEO finds out? We could all end up in prison. I think it's better if we stop this now." His face darkened with anger. "This should be the last time you bring up such stupid and unnecessary issues," he snapped. "You're going to lose your job if you keep this up." I felt a lump in my throat. "Please, sir," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "I'm just trying to do the right thing. I don't want us to get into trouble." "You're a fool with that stupid mentality of yours," he growled. "You don't know how to make money. Apologize and get out of my office before I change my mind." I was desperate. I dropped to my knees and apologized, tears welling up in my eyes. He glared at me, his voice cold. "Get out, now." I left his office, my heart heavy with the weight of what had just happened. One day, one of our trucks broke down, and the HR manager told me to accompany the driver to the mechanic shop for repairs. The driver seemed uneasy with me tagging along, and I could sense he had something on his mind. A few minutes into the ride, he tried to lighten the mood with some playful conversation. "Mr. Akoto," he started hesitantly, "my wife has been sick for a while, and I've used all my money to take care of her. I don't have anything left, and I need your help, just this once." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "Go ahead, I'm listening." He sighed and began complaining about his poor salary. "The pay here is so low, it's impossible to make ends meet. I was wondering if you could help me make some extra cash while we're fixing the truck." "How much do you need?" I asked, already sensing where this was going. 5,000 cedis, he replied, looking at me hopefully. I pretended to be concerned. "Don't worry, but how do you plan on making that much?" He grinned, leaning in slightly. "The mechanic will help us out." When we arrived at the shop, the mechanic examined the truck and told us the repairs would cost 15,000 cedis. But then, right in front of me, the driver told the mechanic to make the invoice 25,000 cedis instead. The mechanic agreed without hesitation. After the invoice was prepared, the driver turned to me with a sly smile. "The mechanic gets 2,000 cedis, I get 5,000, and your share is 3,000. I felt a wave of frustration and sadness wash over me. If every driver was inflating repair costs and stealing such large amounts from the company, how could any business survive in Ghana? The thought of how much money was being drained from the company left me feeling disillusioned and deeply troubled. How could I stop this cycle of dishonesty without revealing who I really was? A few days before the goods were set to arrive at the harbour, I received an unexpected call from the HR manager, inviting me to his house for a discussion. I accepted the invitation, though I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. When I arrived, the sight that greeted me was beyond anything I had imagined. His home was a sprawling mansion, complete with 3 luxury cars parked in the driveway. The interior was equally impressive, adorned with modern decor that exuded wealth and success. I couldn't believe my eyes. This was the same manager who always drove a modest company car, giving off the impression of a simple, unassuming lifestyle. It hit me then. Wolfer, the previous owner, had no idea about the lavish life this manager was living. Nor did he realize that the luxury surrounding this man and his family was funded by the very company they were supposed to be serving. The manager had been quietly siphoning off company money to enrich himself, all while pretending to be a loyal, dedicated employee. As we sat down in his opulent living room, the manager leaned back in his chair, a smug smile on his face. "So," he began, "the goods are arriving soon. This could be a very profitable moment for us." I nodded cautiously, waiting for him to reveal more. "You know," he continued, "if we play our cards right, we could both benefit significantly from this shipment. There's a lot of money to be made, especially if we handle things strategically." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach, but I kept my expression neutral. "What do you mean by strategically?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Look, I'm not just talking about what the company makes. There's an opportunity here for you to make something for yourself too. You should start thinking about your future. Do you own a house?" The question caught me off guard. "No," I replied, "but I have some land." His eyes lit up and he nodded approvingly. "Good, good. You should prepare to build your own house. This could be the start of something big for you. If you work with me, you could be living like this in no time," he said, gesturing to the luxurious surroundings. The implication was clear. If I went along with his schemes, I could join him in this lifestyle, funded by the company's money. His confidence and blatant disregard for the company's well-being made my skin crawl. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I was seething. How could someone be so brazenly corrupt? How could he justify driving a company into the ground just to enrich himself? I thought back to the veiled threats and warnings he had given me before. I realized that questioning him now would be futile, perhaps even dangerous. So I kept my thoughts to myself, nodding along as he outlined his plans. But inside, I was fuming. This man had no real stake in the company's future. To him, it was nothing more than a cash cow to be milked dry, and when it eventually collapsed, as all things built on corruption inevitably do, he would simply walk away, blaming the owner and finding another job to continue his cycle of deceit. After he finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair again, looking pleased with himself. "Think about it," he said. "A few smart moves, and you could be living in a place like this. We just have to look out for ourselves, right?" I looked him in the eye and replied, "Of course I understand." But as I left his house that evening, all I could think about was how dangerous people like him were to any business. They were the kind who had no regard for the company's success or the livelihoods of others, driven solely by their selfish interests. It was a harsh reality, one that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Such people could destroy a company from the inside out without a second thought. As I drove away, I resolved to gather as much evidence as I could. The company, and everyone who depended on it, deserved better than this, and I would make sure they got it. It was time to strike, but I knew that patience could lead me to a more successful outcome. One day, as I was on my way to the HR office, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. The HR manager and the accountant were speaking in hushed tones with someone inside the office. As I got closer, I could make out the details of their discussion. They were talking about the company's electricity usage, but it was far from an ordinary conversation about bills and consumption. "We've got it all sorted with the ECG officials," the HR manager said, his voice smug. "They've adjusted the electricity meter so the company consumes large amounts of energy, but we only pay for a fraction of it. In return, the ECG officials come by every month to take their cut. It's a win-win for us." The accountant chimed in, clearly pleased with their arrangement, and it's been going on for so long that even the electricity company of Ghana isn't aware of it. This illegal connection practice is more common than you'd think in Ghana. It's how you survive in this business. I stood outside the door, listening in disbelief. These men had been systematically cheating the company by engaging in illegal activities with the help of corrupt officials. They were using an illegal electricity connection to drastically reduce the company's utility costs, all while pocketing the difference for themselves. This scheme had been running for so long that it had become second nature to them, and they didn't even consider the damage it was doing to the company. If I had acted earlier, I wouldn't have uncovered this crucial piece of the puzzle. This wasn't just about siphoning off funds through inflated invoices or ghost employees. This was a full-blown conspiracy involving external collaborators. The company was being drained from multiple angles, and those responsible were sitting comfortably, confident in their schemes. The day before the goods were scheduled to arrive, I knew it was time to take action and put measures in place to track everything that would happen in the company, both day and night. I had a strong suspicion that the arrival of the goods would trigger a flurry of illicit activities, and I needed to be prepared to capture every moment of it. I went to the company yard under the guise of checking on the preparations for the shipment. While there, I noticed something that played perfectly into my plan. The company's existing CCTV cameras were inactive. Whether by neglect or design, this lack of surveillance provided me with the perfect opportunity. Without wasting time, I went into the office and discreetly planted a few secret cameras in strategic locations. These cameras were small, easily hidden, and would allow me to monitor conversations and activities that might take place once the goods arrived. I knew that the HR manager, the accountant, and their accomplices would likely be at their most active during this time, and I wanted to catch them red-handed. Next, I needed to cover the company yard, where the unloading and handling of the goods would take place. Knowing the importance of this area, I managed to divert the security officers' attention, engaging them in casual conversation and subtly directing them away from my target locations. With their focus elsewhere, I quickly and quietly planted additional security cameras around the yard. These would capture any suspicious activities, particularly during the critical moments when the goods were being offloaded. After ensuring that the cameras were well hidden and functional, I left the yard, feeling a mix of anticipation and tension. I knew that once the goods arrived, a lot would happen. There would be no turning back, and I had to be ready for whatever was coming. My patience had led me to this point, and now it was time to see my plan through. The next day, the much-anticipated shipment arrived at the company yard, filled with household goods, furniture, and security doors. It was a significant delivery, and over the course of 3 days, all the goods were meticulously offloaded and arranged in the company warehouse. As the logistics coordinator, it was my responsibility to keep accurate records of everything. But I knew from experience that in an operation of this scale, it might take months before anyone detected if items went missing. The stakes were high, and I could feel the pressure mounting. A week after the arrival of the goods, the HR manager approached me with what he called a special task. He instructed me to make a supply delivery to one of our clients, a transaction worth over $25,000. However, what he said next made my blood run cold. He told me and the accountant to only record $10,000 of the total transaction in the company's books. The rest, he explained with a smirk, would be handled off the record. I was stunned. The manager then proceeded to pocket $8,000 from the deal, handing the accountant and me $7,000 to split between us. My hands were shaking and sweat beaded on my forehead as I realized just how deep the corruption ran. This wasn't just a one-off incident. This was a well-oiled machine of theft and deception that I was now being pulled into. The magnitude of what was happening was overwhelming, and I knew that things were spiraling out of control. Later, we made another delivery, this time to a store owned by the HR manager's wife. A large shipment of goods was sent to her store, and the accountant informed me that I shouldn't concern myself with those goods. The shop belongs to the HR, he said, his tone casual but his words heavy with implication. He'll settle us later, but this is how it's been for years. Even when the previous managing director and logistics coordinator were here, they were part of this business with the HR. When they had financial disagreements, the HR fed false information to the CEO, Wolfer, and got them sacked. After that, until a new manager was employed, the HR took on the role of both HR and acting managing director. So be careful before you think of complaining. The accountant's words confirmed my worst fears. Every time goods arrived, the HR manager would take a portion for his wife's store without paying a single pesewa to the company. It was blatant theft, hidden under the guise of routine business operations. And the worst part, the HR manager was the most powerful person in the company. Everyone was terrified of him, and Wofa trusted him implicitly, seeing him as an innocent, loyal employee. But deep down, the HR manager was the mastermind behind the company's slow destruction, bleeding it dry bit by bit. As I processed everything, it became clear that the HR manager had built a fortress around himself, fortified by years of deceit, manipulation, and fear. He had been in the game so long that he knew exactly how to protect his interests and eliminate any threats to his power. The accountant's warning echoed in my mind. This was a man who wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who stood in his way. It was only 2 weeks before Wolfer, the CEO, was set to return from abroad and officially introduce me as the new CEO of the company. The anticipation was building, and I knew that the moment of truth was fast approaching. One evening, as I sat in my office, I decided to review the footage from the secret cameras I had planted around the company. What I saw almost made me lose consciousness. The footage revealed a shocking betrayal that ran even deeper than I had imagined. In the dead of night, the accountant, someone I had already identified as part of the corruption network, was caught on camera collaborating with the security guards in the yard. Together, they had brought in a different truck, one that had no business being on company grounds. With eerie precision, they opened the warehouses and began loading a vast amount of goods into the truck. Goods worth thousands of dollars. As I watched in disbelief, it became clear that this wasn't just an isolated incident. This was a well-organized operation, a secondary scheme running parallel to the one orchestrated by the HR manager and the rest of the corrupt leadership. The accountant had his own team, his own network of thieves, systematically robbing the company under the cover of darkness. The sheer audacity of it all left me reeling. After they had finished loading the truck, the accountant casually handed over wads of cash to the security officers on duty, ensuring their silence and cooperation. The image of the money-changing hands burned into my mind, a symbol of the deep-rooted greed that had taken hold of this company. These men were not just employees. They were predators, feasting on the very lifeblood of the business that sustained them. I sat back, stunned by the enormity of what I had just witnessed. How could people be so wicked, so consumed by greed, that they would steal from the very company that provided for them? It was as if they believed the company existed solely for their benefit, and they were entitled to take whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. The scale of their theft was staggering. They were earning more than the CEO himself, all through deceit and treachery. The company, which should have been a thriving enterprise, was being bled dry by the very people entrusted to protect it. Each stolen truckload, each bribe, each act of corruption was another nail in the coffin of a business that had the potential to flourish. And yet, these individuals, driven by nothing but their own selfish desires, were willing to destroy it all for a quick profit. I had already informed the police about all the information I had gathered and coordinated with them on the timing of the arrests. The moment of reckoning was close. Finally, Wofa returned to Ghana, and the HR manager, oblivious to the trap that had been set, told me that Wofa would be holding a meeting with all the staff in the company. Even though I was fully aware of everything that was about to unfold, I acted as if I knew nothing, maintaining the facade of a diligent but uninformed employee. That evening, I meticulously gathered all the evidence I had collected from day one. I organized the videos, documents, and records into a comprehensive dossier that left no room for doubt. Everything was prepared for the meeting the next day, the moment when all would be revealed. The next morning, I arrived at the office, mentally prepared for the day ahead. However, what I saw upon entering the company grounds left me momentarily stunned. Every single worker, including the HR manager, had reported to work earlier than me. This was a shocking departure from their usual behavior. Normally, they were notorious latecomers, showing up hours after the official start time. But today, they were all present and accounted for, ready and waiting before I had even arrived. It was immediately clear to me what this meant. These people, who had been so casual and complacent in their corruption when they thought no one was watching, were suddenly on their best behavior now that Wofa was back. They were fully aware of the wrongs they had committed, and their early arrival was a desperate attempt to present themselves as hard-working, loyal employees. It was a stark reminder of how differently they operated when they knew they were being scrutinized. As I walked through the office, exchanging greetings and observing the nervous energy in the air, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On the one hand, it was infuriating to see these people pretend to be something they were not, knowing the extent of their treachery. On the other hand, it confirmed what I had suspected all along. They were fully aware of their wrongdoing and knew they had much to lose if they were ever caught. But today was the day they would learn that their charade was over. With everything in place, I knew that the truth was about to come crashing down on them, and no amount of early arrivals or false displays of loyalty would save them. As the meeting time approached, I could feel the tension in the air thickening. The staff gathered in the conference room, trying to look composed and professional, but there was an undercurrent of unease. They had no idea that the very person they had been deceiving, the man they had been stealing from, was about to expose them all. Wofa arrived, greeted warmly by the staff, and the meeting began. As he spoke, praising the hard work of the team and discussing future plans, I sat silently, waiting for the right moment. Wofa stood before the gathered staff, his expression one of practiced calm. "Before we proceed," he began, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone who has been carrying a heavy load in this company. The HR manager, who has also been serving as the acting managing director, has worked tirelessly to manage multiple responsibilities. His dedication and hard work have not gone unnoticed." The loyal staff, those who had remained unaware of the darker undercurrents within the company, began to clap enthusiastically, their applause a show of support for the HR manager. The man himself offered a modest smile, bowing his head slightly, as if to say that he was simply doing his duty. But beneath that composed exterior, I knew the truth was about to hit him like a sledgehammer. As the applause died down, Wofa's tone shifted. "However," he continued, "despite the hard work and dedication shown by many of you, this company has been facing significant challenges. The losses we've been incurring have become unsustainable, and I've had to make some difficult decisions. After careful consideration, I realized that I could no longer bear the burden alone. That's why I've decided to sell the company to someone I believe has the skills and vision to turn things around." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. The HR manager's face began to tighten, and the accountant shifted uneasily in his seat. They were starting to sense that something was amiss, but they still didn't know just how deep the waters were about to get. Wofa glanced around the room, letting his words sink in before delivering the final blow. "The main reason I returned to Ghana was to introduce you all to the new CEO of this company. I've known him for a long time, and I have full confidence in his ability to make the necessary changes and rebuild this company from the ground up. He's been with us for some time now, working behind the scenes, and he instructed me to keep his identity hidden until my return." The room grew tense, the air thick with anticipation. Every eye was on Wofa as he paused for a moment, letting the silence build. Then he turned to me. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce to you the new CEO of this company, Mr. Akoto, the logistics coordinator." For a split second, the room was frozen in shock. The HR manager and the accountant looked as if the ground had been pulled out from under them. Their eyes darted around the room, their faces pale, sweat starting to bead on their foreheads. The realization that their time of manipulation and deceit was over hit them like a tidal wave. As I rose to my feet, the tension in the room reached its peak. The HR manager, clearly panicking, began to edge toward the door, his instinct for self-preservation kicking in, but I was ready for him. "Hold on," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "There's something more you all need to know before anyone leaves this room." The HR manager hesitated, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. The accountant, too, was beginning to visibly sweat, his earlier confidence shattered. As the meeting continued, I took a deep breath and prepared to unveil the full extent of the betrayal that had been festering within the company. I connected my laptop to the projector and began playing the audios and videos that I'd meticulously collected over the past several months. The evidence was irrefutable, and as the recordings played in the conference hall, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. The room was filled with the sound of the HR manager's voice, casually discussing his schemes with the accountant, planning how to siphon off more money and goods from the company. The footage showed late-night activities in the yard, with trucks being loaded with stolen goods under the cover of darkness. Wofa, sitting at the head of the table, watched in stunned silence as the reality of the situation became clear. His most trusted employee, the HR manager he had praised just moments ago, was at the center of a network of thieves that had been systematically draining his company dry. The thieves sat in shame, their faces pale and their hands trembling. The other staff members, who had known nothing about these activities, were visibly shocked. Some whispered among themselves, while others simply stared in disbelief. When the video ended, I turned to Wolfer, who was still processing what he had just witnessed. The pain and disappointment on his face were clear. He now understood why his once thriving company had been collapsing, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. The people he had trusted the most had betrayed him in the worst possible way. Before anyone could speak, the doors to the conference hall opened, and the police officers I had coordinated with earlier walked in. "Arrest everyone whose name or face appears in these recordings," I instructed. The officers moved swiftly, placing the HR manager, the accountant, the truck drivers, and the complicit security guards in handcuffs. As they were led out of the room, their heads hung low in shame. The other employees watched in stunned silence, knowing that justice was finally being served. With Wolfer by my side, we left the conference hall and headed to the store where the stolen goods had been sent. The police followed closely, ready to reclaim the company's property. When we arrived at the store, Mr. Akwaboah's wife greeted us, clearly unaware of the storm that was about to hit. As the police began cataloguing the goods and preparing to return them to the company, she looked on in shock. She had no idea that her husband had been involved in such illegal activities, and the revelation was devastating. Over the next few months, I made it my mission to ensure that justice was fully served. I worked closely with my lawyers to seize everything the culprits owned, their houses, cars, and any other assets they had acquired through their corrupt dealings. Despite their best efforts to hide their wealth, we uncovered enough to recover a significant portion of what had been stolen from the company. With the evidence firmly in place, the HR manager was sentenced to 12 years in prison, the accountant to 10 years, the security guards, the drivers and others to 6 years each. With the corrupt elements removed, I focused on rebuilding the company from the ground up. I recruited new workers and staff, prioritizing integrity and honesty above all else. I implemented strict measures to ensure that theft and corruption would never again find a foothold in the company. Surveillance systems were upgraded, financial oversight was tightened, and a culture of transparency was established. The company began to flourish once more, and the fear of accountability kept everyone on their toes. There was a renewed sense of purpose among the employees, and the atmosphere in the workplace shifted to one of collaboration and mutual respect. Looking back, I realized that the corruption that had plagued the company was not just a reflection of the individuals involved, but also of a broader issue within the society. There are countless jobless graduates and skilled individuals in Ghana waiting for opportunities that might never come if corruption continues to thrive. If we, as a society, practiced honesty and loyalty, it would encourage many wealthy individuals, especially those abroad, to invest in businesses in Ghana again. We often blame the government for the lack of opportunities, but the truth is, we need to look at ourselves as well. Corruption at every level erodes trust, stifles growth, and drives away investment. It's a vicious cycle that only we can break. By holding ourselves to higher standards and cultivating a culture of integrity, we can rebuild not just individual businesses, but the economy as a whole. My company's turnaround is proof that with the right values and the right people, success is not only possible, but inevitable. And I hope that others will see this as a call to action, to clean up their own houses and contribute to a brighter future for all. The HR manager, Mr. Akwaboa, in our story, serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of pursuing wealth through unjust means. He spent years building a life of luxury on the back of dishonesty and corruption, but in the end, he lost everything: his wealth, his freedom, and his reputation. This echoes the wisdom of Jeremiah 17:11. Like a partridge that hatches eggs it did not lay, are those who gain riches by unjust means. When their lives are half gone, their riches will desert them, and in the end they will prove to be fools. True success and lasting wealth come from hard work, integrity, and fairness. Those who seek shortcuts through corruption may enjoy temporary gains, but ultimately they will find that their ill-gotten wealth slips away, leaving them with nothing but regret. Let this be a lesson to choose the path of honesty, for it is the only path that leads to true prosperity. Thank you for tuning in to Ananse Web of Tales. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share it with your friends. Let us know where you're watching from, and if you've encountered similar corruption activities in your country, type yes in the comments. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you in the next story. Thanks so much for watching.